Wake up.
All right, I'm going to call the Economic Development Commission meeting to order. Today's Thursday, December 8th. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from October 13th. Did anybody have any comments, changes? Take a look at them, and if there are none, do I have a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So, next thing on the agenda is...
You can mark me abstain, please.
Yes, you weren't here, or a member at that time. So speaking of new members, I first want to, good morning, Jay.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. You missed the fun part. We approved the minutes. I'm so sorry.
What's the fun stuff without me?
So the next thing on the agenda is Chuck Miner has resigned from the commission, and Chris Mealy has resigned from the commission, who was only here for one meeting, and then his work schedule got exceptionally crazy. We have two new members. One is here today, Tom Frank. I'd like to introduce him and welcome him to the commission, or what's going to be the new something, as we discuss it later.
Thank you.
If you just want to say a few words about your background.
Oh, sure. Sure, be happy to. I've been a resident of Simsbury for the last 16 years. Married, wife Annalise and I live over in West Simsbury. I was a member of this commission about 10 years ago for a couple years. In fact, was the chair of it for about, I think, almost 2 years. And then left to live in Lithuania for a while, of all places. I'm a teacher at Central Connecticut State University, also University of Hartford. That's a second career following about 40 years in corporate life with various companies in the United States and internationally. I feel as though I can bring to the commission a great deal of business experience and a tremendous devotion to the town of Simsbury. I also, by the way, am a member of the Board of Education and a member of the Democratic Town Committee service that I do.
Okay, thank you.
Are you still on the Board of Ed?
I am.
You're welcome, and thank
Thank
you
you
for your service. So I received a letter from Lisa Hebner, First Selectwoman, and Sean Askham, who is our liaison to EDC. I assume, my apologies for not attending all the Board of Selectmen meetings, but it came out of a Board of Selectmen meeting, I assume, a letter to the Economic Development Commission, which was attached to the agenda that came out to all of us.
Everyone get that?
Does everybody have a copy of that in front of them? Because we're going to be working off of that today.
Just give me a second.
Oh, sorry. Let the wounded guy work, okay.
You could, huh?
Jay.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Okay,
But
so
I
we'll wait
could, I
for-
could call it up on my
No,
computer.
we'll wait for Tom to get, that takes 2 seconds.
Okay.
Make a few quick copies, because that's going to be
I
what
read
we're going to
it.
be working off of today.
Would you with Vilnius?
Pardon me?
Lithuania, Vilnius?
I should have made sure.
I taught in Vilnius, and I also taught in
That's the
Klaipėda
holidays.
in the western part of the country.
We went over when I was
And then there's
still
black ice everywhere.
over there in the early 90s.
My driveway should not be a skating rink at 7:30 a.m.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's
Well,
black
I
ice.
will
I mean,
bet you that
that fog is freezing.
within a year.
Yeah, I don't know, it's hard to say. The country it's developing very slowly.
Just get those teenagers to
We
school,
were brought in, I worked
or they're slipping all over the place. So, I guess one of the, while he's making copies, I want to thank those of you who sent me information about your backgrounds and stuff like that, but I think and Tom just gave us his background and his interest in this commission, I think it would be appropriate, just for public record, to do a quick 2-minute, why are you interested in being on EDC? Because one of the charges that this letter has is they want to know what our qualifications are, or what the qualifications should be of EDC members. But I think it would be appropriate, just for public record, just to give a quick 2-minute, what's your background, where does your interest lie, and instead of, because some of us have lengthy interest in it or not, and I just what do you do? How long have you been in town? Why are you on this commission? And what do you want to bring to the table? So since Tom started, we'll start with you, sir.
Oh, okay. Yeah, as far as my interest in the commission and in economic development is I've been a resident of the town for 16 years and going to be a resident of this town indefinitely. And I love it. I want to serve it. I want to see it get better. I want to see its grand list grow so that we can take some of the relief off of property taxes. I think I can bring to the commission a great deal of business experience, all the way up to president and CEO level positions in places like KFC Corporation and Corporate Express and a few others. Also, I'm a teacher of marketing, and I fully intend to bring marketing skills that I've developed over the years professionally and that I continue to teach both overseas and here in the United States to the whole process of economic development. I think those skills are transferable. And so that's why I'm interested in the skills I think I can bring
Need
to
to
the
get
party.
Dave a chair. No, it's not. Come on, we'll scooch over.
Where's the camera?
Look, we're all agreeing on something.
Good morning. Yeah, so that's
Put me in the trash.
that's my background and what I think I can bring to the
Okay. So Dave, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm Chris Barnett. Just to catch you up, we are just quickly going for 1 or 2 minutes to say who we are, what our interest level is in the Economic Development Commission, what do we think we can bring to the table, in preface of our discussion of the letter that we've received from Lisa Hevner and Sean Askham. So first, I'd like to welcome you to the board.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service. And you're up now. So you're the
I am a solo practitioner. My office is in Avon, right near the Avon-Simsbury line, on Route 10, which is a major gateway into our town. I've been aware for some time. I've been a resident of Simsbury since November of 2001. And I've been aware of the concern for the development of our town economically pretty much as soon as I moved in. I have been the acting chair of the Town Board of Ethics. I'm also the vice chair of the Democratic Town Committee. I do not see my role here as anything remotely partisan. This is something that I believe we need to focus in the year that we have remaining of our current constitution to really help the town organizations to focus on what we can do for smart development within this town.
Okay.
Bravo.
Thank you.
I'm Alan Raphael. I had a career in global fund management, investing in currency, stocks, bonds, commodities, literally all over the world. I'm native to the north end of Hartford and was gone for 47 years and decided I'd like to come back. And I moved here in 2007. I've been on the board for about 5 years. Initially, I thought I could do something with some business contacts because I know the desire to live in the United States for some people, but that was a futile exercise in my mind. And to be brief, I want to see what the town would be expecting from the Economic Development Commission in the future, and then I'll decide if I want to be eligible for that. Benita.
My name's Carolyn Bly, and I have a small business called Bly Graphics in town. I've been in town for 26 years, and I've had my business for 24 years. I cater to small businesses in the building industry and real estate, so maybe that's how I sort of got into this role. My clients stand anywhere from architects, engineers, to contractors, to now I have a big account with ESPN in Bristol, so I go to Bristol a lot. I do a lot of environmental branding, so very sensitive to design of how things look in the interior and exterior of facilities. Messaging, how things look, placemaking, all that is very important in today's towns and cities. I see some of that in Simsbury, and I know they have a charrette, and there's very extensive planning, and planning committee deals with that. I was part of the task force. I think I've been on this commission maybe 3 or 4 years. I'm also interested in knowing how long, I guess, this term should be. I think 5 or 6 years, how it is a little too long for members. And maybe it's time for me to retire. I don't know. But I, like Alan, want to understand the expectations of this commission because my work schedule is very busy and I don't have a lot of outside meeting time to focus. I know I was a big part of helping with the website and getting that going. That's what I do for a living too. So hopefully I could bring my marketing and graphic skills to help this town in some way, but I really want to see if I'm a good fit for this commission going forward.
I'm Chris Barnett. I kind of grew up in town. I've been here since I was 12, so a few years. I am a residential real estate agent in town. And acting chair right now, I guess, of this commission, and was an integral part of the task force and the website development for the town. I'm very passionate about economic development, not only from a business standpoint, because it certainly helps residential real estate sales if we have a robust economic community here in Simsbury, but as a resident, we want to keep our tax base down for residences so they can continue to stay and live in the community that they love. I'm very passionate about Simsbury, and I think that's evident to some people, and which is one of the things I bring to the table. I sell this town all day long, and it's that passion and that drive to continue to make this community better that has me wanting to participate, continuing on this in the future. So, Mr. Balboni.
Thank you. I came to town the day after the Great Flood in 1955, and the population of the town at that point was about 4,800, and we're now around 25,000. And so many changes, okay? Great town, entirely different. And I went on this commission. It wasn't a commission at the time in 58 or 59. It was a committee. And Mrs. Shanks she became the first selectwoman. She formed this committee, a commission, to explore basically the Hartford coming into town, which was a very exciting period because very contentious too, I might add. And just as a point of interest, when we had the town meeting, because the town had acquired the land down there where it currently is, and so we had to have a town meeting to transfer the land to the Hartford. And at that point, we had this town meeting, and we had about 3,000 people come to the town meeting. It was so large, it was written up in the New York Times and had a half-page article with a picture showing this meeting where people couldn't even get into the high school to vote on it. Anyway, so you know how that's evolved, and now we have the demise of the Hartford, which has been great for the town. But where we're going with that property and with that land is entirely different than when I first came in here. Other than that, I had 5 kids in the system, and I've been on this commission except when they threw me off for 2 years because I wanted a town manager, and so here I am. So what do I want to accomplish? I guess I'm a historian, if you will, although I was never educated that way. I was an engineer, so that's me.
I'm Jay DeVivo. Career-wise, I started off in venture in Boston, doing investments in early-stage companies. For a few years during after business school, I was a consultant. I had my own consulting shop. Again, working primarily with startups and venture-backed companies, with some publicly held companies as well. I've been working at Cigna in a risk management role for the past dozen years or so. I also have a startup that is working to work with universities to invest in startups coming out of the university community. So that's kind of my professional background in brief. I came to Simsbury a few years after Dave in 2003.
Yes, son.
And I have two boys that are in the school system, and quite honestly, that's the reason why we're here. We have kids. We want a great place for our kids to grow up, and we picked Simsbury. Quite honestly, from from almost across the country, to come back. Both my wife and I are originally from Connecticut. So in terms of kind of the EDC, what my interests are, I've probably gone on a little bit too much, perhaps, at some meetings in terms of what those interests are, and I've sent an email kind of to most of the folks on this group, except for Dave and Tom haven't had that yet. But essentially some of the things I see here are, there's a pretty big, so there are a couple issues with kind of like the EDC is, don't really, it's unclear as to what the responsibilities are. Some of the things that fall under EDC are pretty wide. I mean, it's a pretty wide spectrum of things that have kind of come under the EDC, and you can make an argument that a lot of them could, because economic development is not it's not anything that's done in a silo. It's not anything that's done in isolation. So there's kind of lots of things that you can kind of understand why it kind of came here. So thinking about what's the direction of the EDC is something that we certainly need to discuss, but I think we need to be doing it with some other folks as well. So I think specifically the Board of Selectmen should be involved actively, I think, in this process. The town manager, now that we're kind of going in that direction, should probably be involved in that process as well. We're kind of jumping in there. We don't have that person yet, which is fine. In terms of where my interests are and kind of the broad scope of kind of economic development, it's bringing new businesses to town that are kind of fall under the general umbrella of kind of knowledge worker intensive industries. So bringing in biosciences, green tech, high tech manufacturing, bringing in high paying jobs in the industries of today and the future into Simsbury. And I think we have a ton of opportunities in Simsbury. A lot of the things that are not kind of specific to economic development, like our school system, the beautiful setting that we find ourselves in, those are our tools for economic development. And I think they've been underutilized, particularly in light of the businesses that I and I think others probably are interested in attracting.
Madam Chairman, on the subject of what Jay just said about the responsibilities of the commission being unclear, just for the record, one of the things that I've been very interested in is the state statute that governs the establishment of commissions of this type. And with your permission, I'd like to just read a brief section of the statute, if you don't mind.
That's fine. That leads me into a question about the. Well, okay, go ahead.
The statute, this is, I won't go into the details, 2011 Connecticut Code, Title VII, Municipalities, and so on and so on and so on. And what it says is this. It is a statute that basically regulates the establishment of economic development commissions in the state of Connecticut, and it's been in place for quite a while. And it clearly spells out the responsibilities of this commission, and it says the following: the commission shall conduct research into the economic conditions and trends in its municipality, shall make recommendations to appropriate officials and agencies of the municipality regarding action to improve its economic condition and development, shall seek to coordinate the activities of and cooperate with unofficial bodies organized to promote such economic development, and may advertise and may prepare, some of this is shall and some of it's may, print and distribute books and so forth. Additionally, the commission shall annually, not a may, a shall, the commission shall annually prepare and transmit to the legislative body of its municipality, which would be the Board of Selectmen, a report of its activities and of its recommendations for improving such economic conditions and development. And then the last clause in here is something about budgetary matters as far as finance. That is a very, very clear statement on the legislative books of the state of Connecticut as to what the responsibilities of the commission should be at the present time. Now, whether or not that statute will apply to the new form of the Economic Development Commission, I don't know, but I thought it would be useful, at least as background for our discussion, to read it. Thank you.
Tom, does that notification include anything about the committee being appointed or elected?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there's a whole list of, there's a great big paragraph that precedes these sections about how, what the terms are, the terms of the membership, how vacancies are going to be filled and so forth.
It is going to be, is it connote exactly being elected or being appointed?
It's appointed.
Appointed, okay.
There are some EDC commissions in the state of Connecticut where they are elected positions versus appointed, the majority of them. I think when we were researching for the website, a lot of them were appointed positions. So, thank you for reading that, because that leads me into the question regarding the letter that was delivered to us. And I guess I want to understand, prior to us going into this discussion, what was the discussion behind this at the Board of Selectmen meeting? What are the expectations in terms of a report back to the Board of Selectmen? Because there's not a date in here of when they want, because this is, I think, a little bit larger than a one meeting conversation, and certainly want to have Lou, who couldn't be here today, as part of the process, as a long-term EDC member as well. Want to understand what the expectation is from the Board of Selectmen in terms of timing on this, how the new vote, how this statute plays into the vote that was taken and the change coming for 2017. So if you could give us some background on that prior to...
This is a work in progress, there's no doubt. I think the primary driver here, I think, was the struggle that we've had working together to try to figure out what direction to head, what the goals ought to be. And with the obligation now placed on the Board of Selectmen to constitute an economic development commission in the next term, and to establish its roles and responsibilities, I think the concern was that we really didn't have a good picture of what some of the best practices are out there. They did not, Chris, you're quite right, no date was set, I think, with Sean Askham here on a more regular basis going forward. There will be opportunities for some real interaction, and also opportunities for the boards to convene together to work through some of this stuff. But I think the goal is really within the guidelines of the statute that Tom just read to figure out what's working, what size works, how many people seem to work well, what level of what types of backgrounds will work, what mission statements seem to be working well for people. So there's a lot of information to take a look at, and I think it's starts from the presumption that we certainly don't have all the answers right now. So this is
So by statute, is there a date by which they have to have a formal description of the new what's it going to be called? It's not a commission,
It'll still be called an Economic Development Commission, under
under the new charter.
Right, the charter said, really all the charter did was change the means of appointment, but to be perfectly clear, the charter requires the Board of Selectmen to appoint an Economic Development Commission.
Okay.
As far as the due date is concerned, it would seem to me that the due date, we as a existing commission, to respond to this task, which is a very significant task that we've been given, a reasonable due date for a formal proposal to the Board of Selectmen would be the existing Board of Selectmen, and that the due date should be something like the first meeting of the Board of Selectmen in October of 2017.
That would make a lot of sense, Tom.
That would make sense to me, and if we could agree on that as a due date, then we could start putting a work plan together to meet that date, to meet that deadline.
Yeah, one of the concerns I have is that we're doing this in a bit of a vacuum. So let's go back 2 months ago, which was our last meeting.
Right.
Okay, and we had a conversation really kind of along the lines we're having now, and we said, okay, so the next meeting is going to be a working meeting, and we invited the Board of Selectmen to come to participate in the meeting. And as I look out on this vast crowd, right, there's no one from the Board of Selectmen here, kind of consistent with every meeting that we have. So, so the thing that's challenging, okay, about this rule is commissions can't drive anything, okay, because commissions are lots of people who are volunteers, and we have no official role with the town, we're not officers of the town, right? So to do some of the lofty ambitions and goals that we have for economic development in this community is we need a point person. Now, for a while that was, someone was it going to be the first selectman? We talked about getting, hiring a professional, chief economic development officer. Now we're going to a town manager, but we need someone who's going to be leading the charge. The commission should be supporting the efforts that are spearheaded by an officer of the town. We can, we're not just, kind of doing their scut work, although we should be doing some of that too. We should be coming with ideas. We should be, but we should be supporting those efforts. We should be going to meetings, trying to bring things like the $500 million tech park in New Britain that could have been in Simsbury. Why not? I tried 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, and I couldn't get them to take a meeting.
Well, in terms of the particular discussion item that we're addressing right at the moment, we're addressing how, from a process standpoint, should the existing Economic Development Commission respond to this request from the Board of Selectmen. We have to put together a work plan. If we decide we want to respond, I guess that's the first thing.
Well,
and the second thing is, if we do want to respond, what is the work plan going to be? And I would submit to the existing commission what this project that's summarized on this one simple piece of paper needs is a project director. We must have somebody on this commission that is willing to take responsibility to manage our way through this project, to make assignments, to have people do work outside of meeting time, to meet deadlines, to shape the agenda for our meetings so that we can respond to this every single meeting between now and October. But that's what we need. We need a project director.
No, I agree. I agree with your points. But I also think what we need is we need some input from the Board of Selectmen as to, well, what do you intend to use us for? What do you want, Board of Selectmen? Because you're the elected officials. There's going to be a town manager. We can't really do anything ourselves. So what's the vision? So, while I agree, you're right, we need someone on this commission to do exactly what you said. We also need other members of the other stakeholders, specifically today, the Board of Selectmen, at some point, a town manager, to articulate a vision that is larger than what the folks here on the commission are doing for how economic development, big E, big D, is going to work in town and what the strategy is. Not all of those things will fall to this particular commission, right? Because it's
Presumably, that will be the responsibility of the new Board of Selectmen and the town manager and the new first selectman. They are going to shape those policies, and they are going to say, here is how we want to use you, meaning the new Economic Development Commission. Right now, as I see this commission, we are very much a lame duck commission as we exist today. We have we have continuing responsibilities, of course, but our main responsibility is this.
You know what? I do not want the public to think that we have done absolutely nothing. We had an economic development task force for 3 years that was exceptionally productive, okay, in changing things, not only for, the focus of some of these commissions, land use boards, the redo of the website. There are several of us sitting in this room that spent countless hours of our free time redoing things. Okay, so I take offense. I'm sorry. When I'm spending 20 hours a week doing site plans for a website, we are not a lame duck board when there are people on this commission that made sure things were happening.
Well, when I say lame duck, I don't mean that this board hasn't been productive. It has. And in fact, I was one of the people at a public meeting on the subject of restructuring to support the continued existence of this board. I know that it's done really good, and I don't want that lame duck comment to be misinterpreted, but what I meant by that is that this commission, as it exists, has a lifespan of about another 10 months.
Absolutely.
So that's what I meant. Not that it was an unproductive board, but it is a board that is about ready to go off into the mist of history. And there's going to be a new one. In the meantime, we've been charged with a very significant responsibility.
Well, but when we've been charged with a significant new responsibility where we have asked, this commission has asked several times of the Board of Selectmen for a mission, we need to understand what the priority is of the town for economic development from the leadership in this town. We are not the elected leaders of this town. We need the elected officials that the people have elected to step up to the plate and say, this is what our economic development mission is for the town, and this is what we need your assistance with before we can do anything.
Well,
because if we're doing something and they're doing something and someone else is doing something and all the parties aren't talking about what that goal is, what's the point?
We should really be like, we should be almost consultants. This should really be a board of consultants to advise officials on issues and to participate. Participate in meetings with. We're trying to bring companies here. We should be participating in those meetings. We should be participating, but we can't be driving it. I mean, this is like asking your, director of finance to say, come up with the strategic plan for the company. Well, they're the director of finance. They've got a pretty narrow scope. It's unreasonable to ask, to have that role. So basically, it seems like they're asking us to do something completely out of context because there's a much larger thing going on here, and we're not getting, to Chris's point, we're not getting any feedback or participation from people who were elected.
Well,
I do think the big. I'm sorry.
That's kind of an interesting question because, and I hope Tom will take this on board, that I interpret this to mean that the existing Board of Selectmen and the existing First Selectmen are asking us to be consultants for the next 10 months and to put together a plan for the new Economic Development Commission, including our own ideas as answers to the very same questions you just raised. So they're saying, what do you think? And we're saying to them, well, what do you think? I would suggest right now, I don't care what the Board of Selectmen thinks. Right now, I think it's our responsibility to tell the Board of Selectmen what they should think.
Well, I would disagree with that.
I'm sorry, David, but if you guys need clarifications on what they've asked for, I'd be more than happy to take them back. But I mean,
Have them actually do better than that. Have them come here. I mean, they were invited to come to this meeting. So this meeting was, the purpose was to talk about this. And instead of engaging in a dialogue, it's, it feels like they're just throwing something over the fence at us that we get the morning of the meeting and say, boop, here you go.
I think
Well,
we got
good luck.
I think we got the cart before the horse. Here we are trying to figure out how the Board of Selectmen is going to function for the next 8 or 10 or 12 months. We're not quite sure. You read the newspaper, and the newspaper gives you a little feel. Where's this guy's position going to be? Are we going to have an interim manager? Who knows, okay? So there are many questions that the Board of Selectmen have got to answer before we come up with any work plan, period. And I think it is the cart before the horse. So no matter what we do, it may be a waste of time.
If I may, very briefly. First, to answer Tom's implied question of who would we have essentially as a project manager for this, I would submit that essentially would be the chair, and it's the chair.
We don't have a chair.
Well, I understand that, but I'm saying that ordinarily it would be the chair. So if we have a situation where we need to fill a vacancy, then I think our first order of business would be to fill that vacancy. Then we would have our, quote, project manager. Second point is, I speak to a political reality. That reality is that you have well, we've already used this term, we have a lame duck first selectman and a lame duck board of selectmen who are loath to determine for the new board when it comes in 2017 to mandate what it is that they are or are not going to do. They are also therefore going to be loath to mandate what it is that we do as a body. So we're not going to get the kind of direction that we are talking about here and now. That is going to have to be something that comes from within us. So once we've figured out who the project manager is going to be on this, then we can start filling in the details and coming up with not only what the project is really going to look like, how we're going to implement it, and hopefully reach the date, October of 2017, for what we would present to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
And if we don't get that project manager, it's unlikely that anything's going to get done. I would say, now David has suggested that we don't have a chair, maybe we should fill the chair vacancy and then have the chair take responsibility for that. With respect, I would say that if we find it impossible to agree on a chair, which sometimes happens, it happened once before, I know that, then the project director could be appointed by the vice chair from within the ranks of the commission. I mean, a commission member would be, I think, could be an appropriate project director, and I have to say that the way I'm describing this right now is a thinly veiled comment that I believe the project director should be somebody that is experienced in directing projects, a person that has relationships and contacts not only in the town but outside of the town, and a person who has the time to put a tremendous amount of time in putting together a response to this. And in the event that the vice chair or the chair or whomever wants to ask for a volunteer to direct this project, I would happily volunteer to do it.
Well, we could have co-chairs.
Well, to do the project, to be the project director, to be the project manager.
Well, I think that, I agree with everybody that we need to have a project manager, and maybe it's appropriate if October 1st is our potential deadline, that each one of these items on the memorandum be taken as a meeting for discussion with research happening prior to. And certainly would like to engage the other members of the EDC to volunteer to do some of the research on these particular items as well, because we all need help, right? So, and to have a vested interest in this. Because I have the inability to say no.
This is true.
I'll do another full-time job. No, I do. I don't sleep, as many of you know. I don't. I answer emails at 3 o'clock in the morning. Sarah can attest to that. Yeah, because you answer me back sometimes. I have no problem in being a co-chair or a chair. And I'm not saying this from a personal thing, but I think we do need to do a vote either this meeting or next meeting about who's going to be chairing this commission. It's long overdue. And whoever that is, I don't know if we want to wait for Lou to be present. We do have a quorum. You can do whatever you want. We don't have leadership right now. And I've been filling in for a number of months. But, we do need a chair and a vice chair of this commission soon. So I'd be willing to throw my hat in to be the project chair. Certainly would welcome a co-chair if you're interested in doing that, Tom. But it's up for discussion. I do think it would be appropriate to take each one of these items as a discussion, and I think that we need to go back to the great work that the task force did in the report and look at some of the things that they focused on about what the role of this board is, what the role of the Board of Selectmen is, what the role of a potential town manager is with regard to economic development. And I do think it's very important because this has not been happening. One of the focuses of that was having joint meetings so we could all hear projects that were coming to town. The Economic Development Commission has not had any of these wonderful new projects in front of them in, I would say, probably a year as best guess. And I think that has been remiss. We haven't had a relationship with the town planner. We haven't had projects come before us so we could weigh in from an economic standpoint. And I think that is short-sighted. And while we recognize that it's very expensive to have all these attorneys and people involved to do presentations, we've never been invited to the party for having these joint meetings that was recommended by the task force in order to limit the expenses of these projects coming before the land use boards. And we're the beginning of that process. We're not here to comment on if the building is pretty or if it meets inland wetlands codes and all of that. We're here to comment on the economic, is this consistent with the charrette, and is it something that's economically viable for the town, and is it something that we as a commission support from a grand list standpoint? We need to get back to that.
In response to the issue of chair, yes, it's long overdue. And I think we all owe Chris a great deal of gratitude for the yeoman work that she's done, effectively being the chair of this commission without portfolio, actually. Would it make sense, and this is a question for all of us, would it make sense to put on the agenda for our January meeting the election of a chair?
Let me speak to that point a minute, okay?
If I could just finish, David. We could elect a chair, technically we could elect a chair today if a motion were made to change the agenda and it was passed. But I personally think that...
Do you understand how people get on this commission?
I do. I'm the chair of the nominating committee. I'm a chair of the nominating committee for the Simsbury Democratic Town Committee. So
I assume you've put forth some names through your town committee?
Yes.
To the Board of Selectmen?
Yes.
Because I know the Republicans have.
Yes, That's
So right now, we're kind of waiting to see what the Board of Selectmen are going to approve.
For what?
What do we?
All the
Pardon?
vacancies have been filled.
The vacancies have been filled, yeah.
With the exception of,
How could they be
Chris.
filled? We only voted last night on the Republican ones.
Well, we have, I don't know, who was did we have a Republican resign? Because
Yes.
all right, so are we one space short?
Chris was a Republican.
Right, okay, so.
But you had two resign and two are on.
These two are the
Right,
replacements.
exactly. I think we had one more that we were waiting on because we didn't have the name.
Right.
But that could be dealt with as early as December 12th.
There was one position from
Right, I think.
RTC that needs to be appointed.
Right, and I think that's right. And talking to, as we were putting the Board of Selectmen agenda together yesterday, and we realized that the meeting for the final recommendation, I believe, was last night, was it? When is the Republican Town Committee meeting?
Last night.
He went
Yeah,
last
okay,
night.
all right.
That's
So I think any replacements would, should, if someone was recommended, would be on the board's agenda for Monday,
Yeah, assuming it's approved by the board.
assuming it's approved by the board.
Right.
And so there is one vacancy, and just to complete that thought, I personally think it would be appropriate to not try to change the agenda today and elect a chairman, but to let a little time pass, get past the holiday season, and make a determination that our agenda in January will include the election of a chair and further discussion about project management. That's critical.
From a point of order, from the Freedom of Information laws, yes, it is possible for us to vote to change the agenda. I would strongly recommend that we not do that because I think that we would probably have raise a little hue and cry about doing so. I agree with Tom that that ought to be on the agenda for the next meeting, and I strongly support our having a clear head and a head of state of our particular commission. I'm just leery about doing that today. I would also support a person who has been on the commission longer than I being the chair, and then the chair can determine what recommendation to be made to the commission as far as who the project manager would be, whether it's a new vice chair, whether it is someone else from the commission.
So, do we want to take for January for agenda items, the voting of the chair, the voting of the project manager, and do we want to discuss item number 1 on the memorandum, or one of the items on the memorandum, so we can start moving forward on this process? Maybe take the easier of all the list of maybe frequency of meetings and length of terms might be the easiest discussion out of all of this.
Well, the first one, the words that Tom Cook used was best practices. And my understanding of the research that's going to be required to meet this, to do this assignment, is the first step in the process will be an examination of best practices among economic development commissions as to all of these issues in the state of Connecticut. So rather than discuss frequency of meetings or length of terms or size of membership, the first thing we need to do, according to this charge, is to research best practices and have somebody do that, or a group of people, subgroup of people to do it, and then come before this commission and say, this is what we have learned through our research about best practices on economic development commissions as to this and this and this and this.
Because some of that was done as part of the task force when we were looking at websites, and because many of the commissions throughout Connecticut in towns that are of similar size and similar demographics as Simsbury are appointed as well. Some of them have next to no information about themselves out there. It's a secret.
Really?
Not a secret, but it's hard to find information because they're not very robust commissions in particular towns, while others as we found through our research, looking at economic development websites and stuff like that, are a little bit more robust. And some of what we modeled when we were doing our EDC page for content. I've looked at many of those often as part of our discussion about what the best practices were for how we were presenting ourselves to the public on our website.
Well, that research, I presume, was done primarily in Connecticut, and I would only observe that the research on Economic Development Commission best practices does not have to be limited to Connecticut. I am sure that we could prepare a list of the 10 most effective economic development commissions in the United States of America in towns of roughly this size. We could get that list. Or develop that list, and then...
There's some great ones out west that we found.
Yeah.
That's what we modeled our websites
Explore.
after.
We'd have to do some research on their meetings and, read their minutes and do all kinds of weird, very, very nitty-gritty stuff to say, oh, this is what they do. Now, how does that relate to what we do? It's a big project.
Yeah, and it is a big project, and part of that is, so we're not going to be flying to Northern California for some towns outside of...
There's no money in the budget.
Yeah, I know there's...
Trust me on that one.
Yeah. So
why do you think I was lobbying to be the project?
I heard there's a good one in Hawaii.
So the Napa Economic Development Commission's work aside...
I was hoping to go to Cupertino, I'm sorry.
As long as we're not having to go to Juneau, it's all good.
It's actually warmer there than here.
But a lot of what we're going to be doing is, out of necessity, of course, is looking at websites which tell a small part of the story. We really it gives you no sense as to what the involvement is of the other elected officials, how do, or other departments, how do they, what does communication look like between them? So we're only getting, I think, I'm saying don't do the research, we need to do the research.
You're not getting the back of house.
Yeah, you're not getting
interactions.
you're not getting the back of house stuff. And again, I don't want to, the horses on life support. I get it, but this is we're looking at this. We're looking at this as the role of the commission, but there are other stakeholders that are involved in economic development, which are the executive and the legislative, branches primarily. And there's other folks too. There's Lanyard. There's other commissions too. So, I think the scope is kind of meant to be the EDC in other areas, and we should certainly look at that. But we've got to be also, as we're approaching the project, not be necessarily so have the focus so narrow and address the bullet points that were sent to us this morning, but also to articulate a more of a global vision, whether it was going to ask of us or not. As we're approaching, as we're approaching the project, and then it just gets back to people have to buy in, right? People have to buy in.
Well, I agree with, there's going to be a lot of research that needs to be done. I think that research, we're going to be doing it in pieces. We can't possibly talk about everything. It's like solving the problems of the world. And, if we're going to focus on, for January or February, this particular item, that we're taking that item and researching the heck out of that particular topic amongst the towns that we're looking at in terms of how long do these people serve? Here's the town, here's the demographics, here's the size, here's the region it's in, because what's successful for one town is not going to be successful for another. We're not San Diego, we're not Cupertino. We've used Marlborough, Massachusetts as an example, but it's a larger town. what West Hartford does is different than what we do. Because we have, we're more protective of our character of our town. We've got charrettes, we've got plans in place, so we're limited by the scope of those things, so we are not like the Wild Wild West where we do whatever we want. But I think if we do that research with a specific topic in mind, because it can become overwhelming, because there's so much out there. I mean, you could spend, that's like going down the rabbit hole and never coming out. When you start doing some of that research on these websites, it's just.
One way to address that problem, and I agree, it needs to be made into a manageable research project. Given the fact that we don't have any paid consultants to do it, given the fact that we don't have any full-time staff help. But I continue to think that we could find a few what we'll call success models. Maybe in the states, one or two in the state of Connecticut and one or two elsewhere, and just study 4 or 5 reasonably successful economic development commissions here or somewhere else, and develop some conclusions from what we can find out about. And if there's only 5 of them, they could be assigned to members of this commission. And member A would say, you're supposed to go and fully research success model number 1, and you're supposed to fully research success model number 2, and so forth. That's the way we could divvy up the work. That's what the project director is going to do, I think.
So then are we, okay, so in January, we'll vote on chair and project manager, not talk about anything else. We do, however, need to start discussing budget because it's right around the corner, and we typically bring that up in January, correct? Okay. Because that all changes too, as a result of the recent vote.
Goes to 0.
It goes to 0, basically. So am I hearing, do we need to make a motion to have these things on the agenda? I don't think so, because I'm the acting chair.
I think that the acting chair would be able to actually set the agenda.
Yeah, no, I do every month, so.
But I think that it's also, we're all pretty much in accord that officers election, project manager, and budget would be the 3 main topics for the next.
Then I personally would like to charge everybody to, come to the table next time with 2 or 3 websites, 2 or 3 towns that you find as, based on your cursory look of them, as being successful.
Great.
Economic success stories.
That'd be a great start.
Because if we each bring 2 or 3 to the table, hopefully they'll be different. There might be some overlap, but then we'll get sort of a list going, so it's somewhere to start.
That's wonderful. So that could be an agenda item too. Report from the commission members on their research into EDC success models.
Right. Why did you choose this particular town? What was successful?
That's fabulous. Thank you very much. That's really a good next step.
There you go.
There you go.
Two things. If you haven't taken a look at it, the commission members should also take a look at the fair weather marketing study that was completed several years ago. We've had a lot of deliverables. He did a ton of work from all over the country, looked at models, looked at best practices. So I looked at the fair weather marketing study. And then also look at things like the EPA, which just put out very recently a list on economic development and the different, almost like a work plan. This is what you should be doing, and these are the categories and the subcategories as models as well, which could inform your conversation.
Send that to me. I will too. I assume a lot of the members already have the fair weather report. If you don't, I can pack it.
I don't. I just send it.
I'll send it to you.
Electronic document.
Can you send
Yes.
a link to that as well as the task force findings?
Yes,
Final report, so the 2 new members have that. That would be great.
Thank you.
I would appreciate that, along with the link that Sarah just mentioned. Okay. All right. So we're gonna. Number 5 on our agenda, because this was on from last time, is the discussion of our EDC goals. I don't think, based on our just discussion now, that's appropriate. So I think,
Only to say, as we sit here right now, today, as a commission,
well, maybe this is our goal.
do we have a goal?
Right.
We could memorialize that
Our goal is to, by
priority number
October
one
1st.
is to be responsive to the request by the Board of Selectmen by the first meeting in October. That's our goal. It's measurable.
making a
It's a smart
motion?
goal.
Well,
Yes, I am.
Second.
Carolyn?
Yeah, I just want to ask a question. Town manager that's coming into play for 2017, what is the role of EDC in other towns that are in this lame duck role? What is best practices for an EDC during this transition time where we're having to figure out, what do we do now? Are we even going to be listened to? So, I don't want to waste my time, and I'm sure you don't either, to sit here 7 months, talk about these things, and then come the new regime, then no, there's nothing that goes forward. There's nothing, it's all changed. There's new members, it's just all new, and they're not listening to anything that we spent months and months doing. So I love work plans. I'm a task-oriented person. I love deadlines. I just want to have the best use of our time as a commission, and what other towns have been in this situation where they're just sitting waiting for this new government, and what have they done?
Locally, the most recent one was Avon, right? I mean,
Avon's had a town manager for years.
The recent, who in
Small
Connecticut
data
has
set.
recently transitioned from,
Not many.
not many, I mean,
We're it.
we're like a guinea pig.
We're going to be hard pressed to find other examples of
Yeah, I
what
think
we
so.
are right now. But Carolyn raises just a very, very smart question. And it's really the first question that I referred to in some of my initial remarks. The first decision this commission has to make is, does it wish to be responsive to this request? This commission can turn down this request on the basis that this commission believes it will be a waste of time and resources and does not wish to proceed to do this for this and this and this reasons. We could take that position. If we take the other position we could debate it even. The pros and cons of being responsive to this, and then make a decision. Move to be responsive or move not to be responsive, or something like that. So Carolyn, thank you for raising that fundamental question.
Yeah, no, I like that idea of doing pros and cons, and us kind of agreeing and collaborating on the right approach to move forward or to be on hold. I think that is sort of the next debate.
If I might, we are going to run that risk regardless of what we decide to do or not do. The risk is that we come up with a beautiful outline, a game plan, a structure that the new Board of Selectmen can then essentially walk right into, and boom, it's done. They can also ignore us, and that is a reality. I think it is incumbent upon us as members of this commission to do our best to provide the guidance that has been sought by the current Board of Selectmen. And if the new Board of Selectmen choose to ignore us, well, that's their prerogative, but they will then have to answer to the voters as to why they ignored the hard work that we have done, and why they seem to be then not so much in favor of business in Simsbury, because that essentially is what is going to be the optic for them at that point in time. We can't mandate to them. They're our boss. So it's as much as I don't want to waste my time either. I charge $300 an hour. I ain't charging $300 an hour for this.
there's no budget for that.
Exactly. So I don't want to waste my time either. On the other hand, I think we have a golden opportunity to launch the new EDC come the beginning of the next term, December of 2017, if we actually apply our collective wisdom. And I have not been disabused of any notion of the collective wisdom here. I think everybody is pretty darn smart. Everybody has a pretty good idea of where this town is. And I think that most of us here have a pretty good idea of a vision of where we want to be. Let us then set forth and put paper and pen together and give the Board of Selectmen what they are asking for.
Well, on that pro and con thing, and to be responsive to a comment that Jay made earlier, we don't have Sean Askham or Lisa Hevner here to participate in this part of our discussion. That is, should we or shouldn't we use our time and resources to respond to this?
Well, they've asked us to use our resources based on this memorandum.
They've asked us, but they haven't explained why. And they haven't explained what they're going to do with, they haven't explained the process. And so I would submit that we have every right, in fact, maybe even an obligation, to request that the first selectman come before the Economic Development Commission or her representative, come before the next meeting of the EDC, or even have a special meeting for that matter, to explain to us, to give us more background on why we've been asked to do this and what the current Board of Selectmen intends to do with our work product. I think we deserve that.
Yeah, no, I agree, because it's kind of to Carolyn's point. I mean, I think ultimately we need to be responsive. I mean, I think we have that obligation, but I think there's some collective frustration among the commission that there has been no participation from the Board of Selectmen for essentially as long as I've been involved with the commission. I mean, the number of meetings that any member of the Board of Selectmen has attended, you could count on one hand in the last 3 years. I understand the frustration, because it's like, well, then how important are we, and how important is this mission if you don't show up at the damn meeting is ultimately, the question. But, I think we do need to be responsive, because, while yes, we were, while we were appointed by whoever we were appointed by, and we're supposed to be, kind of serving the Board of Selectmen, we're really not serving the Board of Selectmen. We're really serving the town of Simsbury and the now, Dave, 24,000 people who live here now. So, I mean, I think we need to be responsive, for that purpose, regardless of the, kind of the cooperation that we're getting from, kind of the other stakeholders and all this.
So if we're putting on the agenda for January the chair and the project manager positions of this, and there's a motion to do this research about website, bringing websites to the table, do we request that the Board of Selectmen and or its representatives, not just one person, because we want an opinion of several, to be present as part of the discussion at the beginning of our process?
Yes.
My hesitation of just saying, we're not going to respond to this is, I think, irresponsible of our board. If we've been talking for months about how to move this process forward and how to make this a more robust commission and how to get re-engaged, and for us to say we're not going to do anything frustrates me, because we were doing such great work and then the brakes got put on, and I don't want to continue this tit for tat. Like, I'm a doer. We just, in my opinion, we need to get them, yes, we absolutely need to get them engaged personally, not just in memorandum form, but in person as part of these discussions in the process. Maybe the beginning of that discussion is when we are bringing our research and our opinions about good economic development examples. So they can think that will give them information, okay, to start thinking about what does that mean for the Board of Selectmen for the town of Simsbury.
Would you be receptive to a motion in that regard? And the motion would be something
Well, it's not
like...
with our armors, you can make a motion about anything you want.
The motion would be something like this: moved to request at least one member of the Board of Selectmen to appear at the next Economic Development Commission to explain the background of this request and what the Board of Selectmen intends to do with the work product. I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion?
Yeah. My family comes from a long line of military service. As such, I'm well indoctrinated in the concept of rank has its privileges and how it is sometimes considered insubordinate for a subordinate officer to order or even request the presence of a superior officer. And I also don't want to have us get either enmeshed with analysis paralysis or waiting for others over which we have no control to appear or not appear. I think it is imperative on our part to move forward regardless of whether or not stakeholders show up, regardless of whether or not members of the Board of Selectmen show up. It's just our task, particularly with the recent memorandum, is to create an outline for what the new EDC can and or should look like, and to expect cooperation or attendance from those who have thus far demonstrated a marked indifference and or complete disregard for being present or participating, I think would be folly. Now, that is not to say that I'm speaking necessarily against the motion. I think that perhaps we should extend the invitation, but make it clear that, hey, we'd like to have your input. We're going to go forward whether you show up or not. So please attend.
I would affirm that. I agree with those sentiments entirely. But I continue to believe that a project of this magnitude coming just as a memorandum without any personal input or background, I really want to know why this has been asked. And I even more want to know what is going to be done with it. Is it going to be made into a formal recommendation to be put forward at some certain time, or is it just, well, it'd be nice to have something? I don't know what the Board of Selectmen is going to do with our work. I'd like to know, and that's not clear from this what they're going to do with it.
Those are reasonable clarifying questions, which I can communicate back. They also have a meeting on Monday, at which any number of you could come and express what concerns, pros or cons about the assigned task. And that would be a good way to let them know how you all feel about this. So, but there's certainly, to the extent there are requests for clarification and better direction, that's something I'll certainly relay back.
Because I'm challenged with the meeting times of the Board of Selectmen, as is evidenced by my previous lateness at the last one. Is it at 6 o'clock?
Yes, it is.
It shouldn't be, I'm sorry, it should be incumbent upon us to go to their meeting to ask us what they wanted us to do with this. I'm kind of doing a 180 here. We're gonna do this. They were giving us a charge. We're gonna do what we think is appropriate. If at some point in time they want to show an interest in economic development in the town, which they haven't, as evidenced not only by their lack of attendance at any of these meetings, but their complete unwillingness to engage when they've been approached individually on specific projects. So if at some point in the future they wish to engage, maybe they can, and perhaps after they get a deliverable from us, a big light will go on for them, and this new board will come to the light, and they'll be actively involved in the actual economic development of the town. So let's move the train forward. One question I have for next
Well,
meeting.
just to respond to that, with respect, and I continue to feel strongly about knowing why has this been asked of this commission and what is going to be done with the result. Partly, not so much from a courtesy standpoint, but from the fact that I believe we can do a better job on doing the work if we have more background on what's going to be done with it. It might shape, the answer to that question might shape the direction of our work. I really
Yeah, sure. I mean,
But when all these other reports, so when, I'm going to use the Economic Development Task Force as an example. When this task force, because what we're talking about is not unlike a task force studying a particular topic, right?
Exactly. It is.
So the task force met, we had a charge, we had 3 subcommittees, they developed a report. The report was submitted to the Board of Selectmen for review, discussion, and a vote on whether, a public vote on whether or not they were accepting the recommendations of the task force or not as a work plan for them. So what we prepare is not going to be much different than a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen based on our findings here as a commission of what we think that they should be doing. And it's every 2 years when they're getting a new Board of Selectmen, they can choose to do or not to do whatever is in that particular report based on their political agenda.
Well,
And I'm just going to say, I am a firm believer, as to your comment, I am a nonpartisan. I want to do what's best for the town of Simsbury. It doesn't matter what my party affiliation is. It is what's best for the town of Simsbury that is consistent with our plan of development, period.
Well, before we get to the agenda, there is a motion.
Well, we have 2 motions.
That's right.
So,
Let's take care of the first
let's
motion,
take care of the first motion, which
was to provide two examples of successful economic developments to the...
report to the next, for the
Report.
January
That
meeting.
wasn't a motion, that was just a request from the chair. Wasn't ever a motion.
Okay,
Did you have a motion on that?
There's no
What was
motion
the
on
first
that.
motion?
Response to the request of the Board of Selectmen. That's
There's only one motion on that.
No,
that's what I have.
okay,
The one you're talking right now, I don't have that.
That was a request.
okay, I understand that. There was another, I thought that there was,
The other one is the request for the Board of Selectmen to appear at the next EDC meeting. Those are the 2 I have.
okay. Well, let's vote on the senior one first, I would suggest, and then vote on the second.
Okay, what's the first motion?
What's
we
the
need
first
to make?
motion that was made by,
Response to the request of the Board of Selectmen. I don't have the full motion, I only have it partial,
I didn't.
but that's the way
I don't
it
remember
started.
that motion.
Response of the request of the Board of Selectmen.
I'm only remembering one motion.
Tom's motion.
Yeah.
It was Tom's.
The only motion on the floor was Tom's motion. and then
To
we
invite,
discussed-
to
you added to the discussion.
invite at least one member of the Board of Selectmen to appear.
Carolyn seconded.
And Carolyn seconded,
Tom's
yeah.
motion.
Do we have any
Yeah, that's
discussion
right.
on
is
this?
there any more
Yeah, that's right.
discussion?
No, let's vote on it.
No,
Added to the discussion.
Any further
That's
discussion?
what happened.
Madam Chairman, we need discussion.
Acting chair,
Acting Chair.
Can I just do
actually
one-
vice chair.
one quick point of clarification, and I understand some of the frustration of the commission for not having somebody here personally, but I do want to clarify that the First Selectman's Office and the Board of Selectmen are very engaged in economic development, and Tom Cook is the representative from the Board of Selectmen, so I do want to clarify that.
Technically, Sean Askham is the
He's the liaison,
He's the
and Tom is
liaison.
the staff person.
Madam Chairman, we're in discussion, right?
I'm a vice chair, but yes.
Yes,
go
we are
ahead.
still in discussion.
Color mix.
These 2 guys, this is their first meeting here. They don't know much about what this commission has done in the past. I think all of this is premature, and it's premature because until the Board of Selectmen get their own acts straightened out, and we know where we're going with them, we're just wasting our gums. And we're sitting around there talking about motherhood and apple pie and all this stuff, and we all understand it. I just say we postpone the whole thing, so I'm going to abstain from this motion.
Call for the question.
Jay wanted to say something.
I might have before, but I think I'm good.
Jay, you're on the Okay, so do I have a motion, do I have a vote, we're going to vote to approve the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I abstain.
Dave abstains. Okay, the motion carries. Okay. Now that I'm tired.
Motion to adjourn?
Just one quick point, preliminary discussion of the budget. We did ask Tom to include a copy of the budget that we had approved for this year. We need to keep in mind with budget discussions going forward that the Simsbury Main Street now reports to the Board of Selectmen under the new
To
To the first selectman's office.
Task force.
Right. So that will no longer be a budgetary item for the Economic Development Commission. So as we're moving forward with budget discussions going into the new year, I wanted you all to have a copy of what's currently on the table and to have a background of what's going to be in front of us. Very little, but it's certainly something that we need to talk about. Okay. Any older new business?
I have an invitation for all of you that the COST, which is the Council of Small Towns, is having what they call a crash course on economic development on December 13th. It looks like registration starts at 8 and it goes through noon. There's a networking lunch if you wanted to stay at noon. As a town, we can register for $75 and have as many of you as would like to attend that. It's see if I've got the actual location of the thing here.
It's in North Haven on Elm Street.
Thank you. Yes, that's right, in North Haven. And
It's at the library.
Right. So please, I'll send you an email with this information, and if you can attend, let me know so I can do the right thing.
And I've already responded to Tom that I cleared my calendar for
Right.
that.
Exactly.
So I am going.
I just have a quick question as to what we're voting on next week, or next month, rather, next meeting. So we're voting on chair.
Agenda items will be chair, project manager.
Okay, so just to understand, we'll be voting on chair and project manager separately?
Yes.
Okay, so
We need
it's
to
not
do
as though
that-
we vote on a chair and
No.
the chair names the project manager.
No, we need to
If
vote
you
on chair, vice chair, and project manager as three separate.
Okay, thank you.
Clear. Claro.
So I will second the motion to adjourn now.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Have a great day. Any abstaining from that vote?
So you teach at University of Hartford?
I do.
Okay,
I teach in the marketing department.
Nice. I'm a grad and the alumni president this year.
You really?
Yes, yeah. And so I was just at commencement. I'm not on the search committee, but I'm updated. I guess they're close, or they hired somebody, or I think it's going to be, I just wrote my...